Hi, everyone. Just testing to see if this is working. Hi, everyone. Just testing to see if this is working. Hey, there we go. Hi, Ralph. Okay, so thank you for coming to the New Normal Year 2 webinar hangout. I'd like to use the time that we have together as much as possible to answer any specific questions that applicants may have around the program. A few have been sent in advance, which I'll speak to. So to start with, and I can see your chat comments here as well. So if at any point in time during my comments, you'd like to ask a question as a follow-up to anything I say or a topic that we're not addressing, please just feel free to add them to the comments there, and we'll try to get to everything in the course of due time. So let me begin by just quickly summarizing the structure of the curriculum for the program, talk a little bit about what we did last year, and then quickly on things that we'll be focusing on for the coming year instead, or in addition, and then we will go to your questions and comments. So as you know, the program is let's start with Strelka Institute. This will be founded in 2008 originally, and the postgraduate program has been going since then. It's really sort of the flagship program of the institute. I see it as a bit sort of a mix between an educational program in a traditional sense and really a interdisciplinary design research think tank. And so the curriculum is really structured to try to demonstrate and build on this this balance between the two. The program, as we devised it, the New Normal program, was conceived as a 3-year project. Usually the Strelka Institute, there's a new theme every year, which I think is great, but we wanted to do something to where we could bring in a group of truly extraordinary faculty, and we have, I think, and build something over a little bit longer period of time, a little bit of a research initiative in this way. And so the core faculty you may be familiar with, myself, Lev Manovich, Keller Easterling, Liam Young, and Meta Haven. And then each year we also bring in, last year we had 40 people that the researchers would work with from in person and guest lecturers. And this year we'll be adding several more, as we'll have the same thing as well. Dun and Raby will be working with us again this year. Armin Arvanesian will be with us this year, and several other people who we're about to announce will be added to the group for what we've done this year. And so this second year in terms of the curriculums seems like it will be stronger even than the previous. I'll say that the program is urban design. It's focusing on really the futures of cities and urbanism, particularly in the Russian context. We're taking the Russian context of urbanism as a bit as a sort of a microcosm of many of the other kinds of issues, the tensions between traditionalism and kind of progressive universalism that we see in Russia as part of the point of tension that is in many ways perhaps characterizes this contemporary moment. We take urban design though in a probably somewhat less traditional sense. That many of in any given year, half of our participants have an architecture urbanism background, half of them do not. They come from other disciplines. They're artists and computer scientists and writers and filmmakers and programmers and various other interesting things. Half of them are Russian, half of them are not. Half of them are men and half of them are women. And the idea behind this is that we want to use the program as a way to prototype a kind of 21st century urban design practice that we are interested in seeding and supporting, which is one that is more interdisciplinary. It's one that has several different entry points into what may constitute the essential urban design questions at any given moment, which may start with software and then move to planning. It may start with transportation and then move to interface design. It may start with a cinematic scenario of a kind of speculative possibility, and then move into a startup that we ends up launching out of the program, as several did last year. And the cities work at all of these different levels. The complexity and the interrelated complexity of cities works at all of these levels. And so the education for how it is that we would design and designate and reform these should as well. And that's really the kind of the rationale for why we've done it this way. So a little bit more on the nuts and bolts of the program. It is a 5-month residency or not a residency. The researchers are in residence in Moscow for 5 months, from February through beginning of February through middle of June. And there is no tuition for the program. And in fact, the participants are paid a stipend to help offset the costs of living in Moscow, so that they can focus really 24/7 on very intensely on the work that we'll be doing together in the program. And so we set this up in a way in which, in a pretty short period of time, people who are interested in the opportunity to take their work and their practice to this engage with these issues and these faculty and other researchers in a new way, are able to do so in a block of time that is significant enough that they can sort of take a real deep dive, but not so long that they really have to give up previous commitments in an old life. Your life will be there when you go back to it. And that's really part of the plan. So I'll say as well that there are two trips that are also built into the project, into the curriculum. One is, in addition to multiple sort of short trips within Russia itself, there is a longer field trip within Russia. We're still sort of nailing down the location that we're going to this year. Last year we went to Murmansk along the Arctic coast, which is really, and you see online, I should say, also go to thenewnormal.strelka.com, which obviously a URL that you all have, and you can see links to some of the work that we did last year. And I think in many cases, the most direct and clear thing that can be said about what you would be doing if you come to Moscow is to see what the work that came out of last year. And if it's appealing to you, then this is something that you should consider. Our trip to the Murmansk and the Arctic, a lot of the footage that we gathered there, and this really extraordinary landscape around the Arctic, I think was really a highlight of the program. We also last year came to California, Southern California particularly, did a lot of research here. This year we're going to be going east. And we're going to be, a couple of the themes that we began working on last year, which we are continuing and doubling down on this year, have to do with the peculiar urban status of political exceptional zones, such as charter cities, such as enclaves and exclaves, and also special economic zones, ports, whether there's at port cities or otherwise, and particularly the conjunction of the two, how special economic zones may be special political zones in one way or another, and how each of these, either through the role that it plays in global logistical networks or trade networks, and are otherwise may overlap and to some extent presuppose one another, or be very much at odds. And the dynamic of those, that confluence or antagonism of something, is interest to us. And so we'll be going to Hong Kong and Shenzhen, one of the real primary case studies for special economic zones in Shenzhen and for a special political zone in Hong Kong happen to be right next to each other with this very strange, intense border condition in between the two. And so that's going to be an area of research for us as well. We are also looking at another area of research that we're really, two more, I'll say, that we're really, again, doubling down on. One is having to do with large continental infrastructural systems, particularly discontiguous megastructures, as Liam and I call them, and the Chinese-based OBOR One Belt One Road initiative, which will be this enormous trucking and railroad route system going all the way from down to Australia over to Africa, up through Russia, up to in Kazakhstan and Pakistan, over to Rotterdam and Hamburg, will be an area of investigation for us, and also particularly in terms of this question of political and economic sites of exception. Thirdly, then, or perhaps in some ways first, is the question of AI at urban scale, artificial intelligence at urban scale, which is something that many of the projects worked on one way or another last year. And I'll just say that our interest in this is about as far from the typical smart city discussion as you could get. We are interested not so much in AI as a way of sort of optimizing some banal managerial municipal concerns in of itself, though this may be of some interest in some way, but really looking at AI in terms of a distributed sensing and distributed sensing apparatus and distributed cognitive apparatus, AI at landscape scale, rather than AI as a kind of sort of in a petri dish, or sort of manager in a box kind of model. So one way I explain this is, if you think in terms of sci-fi films, and often we use science fiction as an important reference for us in many cases in this work, if in Godard's Alphaville you have this single overarching controlling AI that seems to be, it's personified like Siri or Cortana, and has a kind of master control of the condition and situation. This is not really what we're interested in, or this is not the discussion we're interested in speaking to. If you think of Solaris, the Stanislaw Lem's and Tarkovsky's Solaris, of an alien intelligence that is this ubiquitous oceanic plasmic surface that is in a way sort of totally embodied and unembodied at the same time. This is also not quite what really we're looking at, which would be a kind of cloud-based AI where everything reports back to this single metacognitive entity. Also not really the point. What we're looking at is something probably a bit more ecological, where we think of automation at the edges and artificial neural networks at the edges of systems, and the interaction that seemingly small synthetic entities have as they're distributed over an urban system, and how they begin to evolve and co-evolve antagonistically or symbiotically in relationship to one another in ways that may have very little to do with the kinds of intentions that we have for them. And so this is kind of the attitude that we're taking in this question of the urban AI to heart with as well. I'll speak very quickly. My strong recommendation is that you go to the newnormal.strelka.com website and go through the last year's projects, the information on last year's projects that's there. The videos from the presentations in July is also online, which you can find. A few things that you'll see there that I haven't spoken to quite yet, where there were several projects that were based around blockchain systems, which I think is extremely interesting. It wasn't something we necessarily planned, but it's something that we'll be continuing to explore. As I've said, I think we don't really know what blockchains are, we think we know what they're good for. I'm not sure that we've really discovered their true utility yet. I think what's of interest to me about them is the way in which they function as the center of a conversation on the reimagination of what should count as valuable within a complex economic system, and what kind of infrastructures do we need to sense what actually is valuable, to sense that value, to calculate it, to store it, to distribute it. And so this reopening of questions of economic ontology as a device, blockchains as a device for that purpose, I think is extremely important. You'll see a number of projects around automation, particularly automation at the edges, not automation within centralized platforms, but automation within the edges of networks. You'll see projects Patternist, which is developed quite considerably since July, gone through multiple versions of an augmented reality urban game structure that takes this point of view of the player, of the pedestrian or agent of the city in a more as the sort of center of a larger complex story. You'll see a lot of projects that work with issues around energy and energy sourcing, and how the conception of urban networks that are not only based around the traditional programs of how humans might be housed or moved or employed within cities, but how in which urban systems that are the metabolism of an urban system may be reconceived in new and interesting ways. Lastly, and quite clearly, you'll see a lot of film or cinema, more specifically, we're not really using film stock, and that this is something that will also continue quite a bit. Those of you who are interested or have a background in cinema will take to this. Now, there's a number of other ways. It's sort of cinema, strategy, and software seem to be the three things that we're developing here as well. But as a device through which to tell to communicate a complex proposition quickly, to link a kind of analytic and affective forms of argumentation together in a package that is able to set up a problem, to explicate it, and to demonstrate an understanding of what its solution space might be like. It's been particularly useful for us in this way, and so we're certainly going to continue that going forward. And so I wanted to speak about 20 minutes as a sort of overview of some of the things that we'll be doing in this program as well. So I'm happy to. I would prefer to use the time of this. The Hangouts here to engage with questions directly. And so I'm going to turn to then a couple of questions that had been sent earlier on. Again, please, if there's things that I don't speak to that are of interest to you, please use the chat window freely. I'd be happy to go into more detail on any of the nuts and bolts issues of things that happen with the curriculum, some of the larger conceptual concerns that have animated the formulation of the curriculum, and anything in between. So it's all fair game. If it's a concern interest to you, it probably is to some of the other people online. So please feel free to ask away. Okay, how much will the year 2 students engage with and build on the projects and research of the first year? We will be building on the research themes and areas of the program more generally, but not on the projects, is the way I would describe it. Is that we have, as I said, that the program was imagined as a 3-year research arc and a kind of discontiguous and distributed collaboration between the core faculty working on this. And we've set up some of these themes around speculative megastructures, pattern recognition, synthetic sensing, and these themes that I've sort of discussed. And the things that we've learned about them, that we in the first year of teaching them, will be brought forward and developed in a, I think, more advanced form during the second year. And so those themes are and areas of research are ones that we will bring forward. The actual group projects that were developed at the end of July, Sever and Patternist and DOMA and all the others that you can see online, those are now taking on a life of their own. in the real world, and we continue to engage with them and help support them in various venues. But they're not. We're starting this question of research with a new group of researchers that will be coming in February, and we'll be developing 7 new projects, or 6, or we'll see how many it is. As we 12 or 3, we'll see how it is we work on these together. And so you're not going to rely on the old projects, but we will be developing the themes. Okay. 2, does the course operate in a purely speculative paradigm, where the student projects intend to provide tangible solutions, like, for instance, an app development or software development, or so? Or we work on speculative fictional films and try to understand a given solution or illustrate the near future scenarios? So the answer is both. And you see that in a given project, where we have projects, for example, Patternist, which was a live launched software for iOS and Android and PC and Mac. It has a developing and growing user base. It ended up getting other sort of funding as we've gone along. Of the 7 projects, 2 of them were strictly meant to be done as of 7, 2 of them were strictly cinematic projects. They're really meant to be seen as fictional scenarios. I would say, and then 2 or 3 of them were really meant to be things that we launch now, and we did a lot of very deep research and development engagement and things launch, and 2 or 3 of them were a bit in between. I think the way I would sort of say this is that for us, the speculative is not the antonym, the opposite of speculative is not, in the case of our program, is not, so the opposite is not something that launches for real. That is, it's not speculative, it's something that's purely on paper. It means something that is something that is sort of going back to asking first principle questions again about how these systems may operate and work, and using the means and methods and devices of a more exploratory and experimental exploration of the fictional space, the potential space, the future space of the problem, in order to conceive a point of development and design that may be quite tangible, quite real. And so the speculative, I think, in this sense, needs to be understood as a kind of framework and method rather than a type of outcome. I should also say, one of the I think an important point is that, as opposed to a more traditional urban design program, and I don't mean to disparage these at all, these are in many cases these very important kinds of programs. The types of work that you may see students may develop from this may be a proposal for a new master plan of Sao Paulo, or a new stadium in Pittsburgh, or a new way in which a new multi-use housing development in Manhattan. All of which are practical in the sense that we understand from a physics and engineering standpoint how it is some of the things would work, but from the standpoint of the financing and design and development and land use acquisition in order to make these happen, they may seem quite pedestrian in their design, but utterly implausible in their in terms of the ability of actually to launch them in any proximity to the conclusion of that program. With our program, many of these projects are, in fact, much closer to something that can directly engage with the real world, in the form of games, in the forms of software, in the forms of strategy, and this as well. And so, while they may be rather futuristic, quote unquote, in their perspective, the distance between the final render for the student work and their ability to actually be launched in the real world, I think, is actually much closer than you would find in a traditional program. What kind of specific technical skills will new normal students gain, and what specific technical skills should applicants come equipped with? What were required software licenses for students? Okay, excellent question. Yes, one thing I didn't have an opportunity to speak to in the my summary, being a little bit just for the sake of brevity, is that there's a section in the curriculum that's focused just specifically on technical workshops. Last year, we did a sort of a really wide range of things where students were working with LiDAR systems. We did workshops on processing. We did workshops on machine vision and VR, and a whole range of different things. And I'll tell you the rationale for this was really twofold. One is that we want the work to engage with emerging technologies really directly, and particularly emerging technologies that have a kind of dual purpose. That is, they can be used, they are in one way or another a kind of technology with which cities are increasingly built, that in addition to bricks and glass and steel, that software is one of the basic building materials out of which cities get made. And for designers to be able to have some facility with that new material. On the other hand, there are also tools with which designers are able to design models or prototypes, or to do research about the urban proposal that they're conceptualizing and putting forward. And so, take augmented reality, for example. You may have a project that is positing a software platform in which users are using augmented reality to navigate the city around them. And that is the proposal. You may also have a use of augmented reality in which we are telling a story or designing or communicating a model or plan for an urban redesign using AR as the way to tell that story. And so one is, in fact, AR as the thing, one is AR is about the thing. And we want to be able to do both. The second real rationale for the technical is that we, in addition to having sort of adding tools to the tool chest for our participants, not everyone is going to use all of these things as part of the everyday work that they end up doing. You may come in and not done processing or done anything with machine vision libraries before, and it may end up being a new thing that you actually becomes the direction that your work sort of follows. It may not, but after a direct engagement with the technologies, you'll have a level of conceptual understanding, not in principle, but in a more direct experiential way, how this stuff works. And so it'll allow you to collaborate with those designers for whom these tools really are an important part of their arsenal, in a way in which the new collaborations will be possible. And so this year, a few things we're really focusing on, I think have to do really around new technologies of vision. Machine vision in particular is something that is, on a both theoretical level and also on a technical level, is something that's becoming really quite important to us. And so a lot of the technical workshops will be focusing on this. And this will include more workshops around digital cinema, After Effects, compositing, augmented reality, and different sort of machine structure to this as well. So a lot of the Gene Kagan, the people that we had coming last year will be part of this. We're hoping that Kechi Matsuda will be joining us again for this year, and a number of other sort of equally important people will be coming in and doing these structured workshops. And so in terms of the software licensing that you have, it really depends on the work that you'll be doing. I think that most of the stuff sort of available. We have a few workstations that will be here for you to work on. There's nothing that's going to be required that you won't be able to get in one way or another. But again, you should be prepared to bring your own basic tool set with you. If you have that, bring with your laptop there as well. Having a good workstation laptop as the basis of your mobile office is just a general good thing, for any kind of designer to have. But there's nothing, just to answer the question very clearly, there is no exotic software license that you will be required to purchase to be part of the program. Anything that's not likely that you already have will be making available more generally. Will there be a theoretical written component to the program or only design project output? Yes, I think for us, the theoretical and written component and the design projects are really closely related. The beginning of the program will be focusing more on more of a seminar-based kind of curriculum. We'll all be teaching a lot of this, Lev Menovich, Keller Easterling, Armin Arvanesi, and a number of other people. And this will be more of will be sort of setting the framing of the terms and landscape of the research area that we'll be looking at. Developing that common language, common frame of reference, and set of critical questions that we'll be developing over the course of the 5 months together. The written output of this is really meant as a way to, I still have it's sort of my own prejudice. Probably, I still think in many ways the best design software is still a word processor. That the specification of the idea, an argument, and voice of a project done in a written form is an extremely important part of how it is this works. And so we have a lot of writers in the program, people who come who haven't really been, they're not filmmakers, they're not architects, but they are designers with words. And this is an important part of what we're doing. But everyone will be engaged in this one way or another. The point, however, is to fold this into design projects of various forms that come out during the end. I am open to the idea, in principle, of more text-based ultimate outputs, and the formats of the projects are sort of constantly evolving, and so how text-based that may be at the end, perhaps in addition to other work, because I should say, perhaps it's not clear, the projects are strongly collaborative. They're group projects. And so we put the groups together to build interdisciplinary, complementary interdisciplinary capacities within each group, as opposed to individual projects. And so someone who is a writer or is less strong of a writer would be working with people who are the inverse of themselves. And so everyone would be able to bring the best work to the outcome. Will there be planned time for the New Normal students to consult with the various visiting faculty about personal ongoing research projects outside of the New Normal program? Informally, perhaps. I think that the time that our faculty and the students have developed really great sort of personal and working relationships both inside and outside the program as well. The focus of the program, I mean, while you're here, I have to, it's a very intense program. The time, we've compressed a lot within this 5 months. Those who are admitted to the program are admitted because the work that they've done and the ideas that they're working on are ones that we want to bring into the mix here. In doing so, though, we think we ask everyone to bring all those things to Moscow with them, but to be open to start bringing that with them, but then kind of restarting from scratch with the kind of applications or outputs that work may have. And so there may be things that your ideas or problematics that you're working on with personal projects that fold very directly into the work that we do. Again, that's perhaps why we would be admitting you. On the other hand, it's not an art residency where you're asked to bring a project and be in residency, and then we will advise you and consult with you on the development of that project. We will be developing it collaboratively based on these conversations. And so I hope that's a bit of an answer to your question. We want the ideas and energy of the personal project to come with you, whether that's a written project or a cinematic project or a curatorial project or an art project or an urban design project. But we're going to be doing something new together. That's the idea. At the end of the program, will some of the projects be continued? Do the authors of each project share intellectual property rights with Strelka Institute? The projects so far, each of the 7 projects that we developed last year have taken on, have continued to develop since July. Some in various different ways. Some of the groups, people who are working on one project in one group, are now working on a few of the others on this as well. A lot of the groups we've had alumni from last year's project who are now based together in the same cities. Collaborating on projects together. Some of the films have ended up in festivals. Some of the software-based projects are now iterating and launching based on grants and other initial capital support that they receive from various sources. And so the answer is an emphatic yes, that the projects continue to develop going forward with this as well. Strelka has not made any intellectual property claims on each of the projects, and in fact has actually been supporting the continued development of the facilitation of the relationships necessary for the continuing and development of the projects there as well. We want to see these out in the world and continue to evolve. And so over the course of the 5 months, the version of these that we end up presenting publicly is usually, it's a very, very, let's say it's an extremely well articulated embryo version of the project. Usually the projects, like any of these things, that there's sort of so much that gets made and so many ideas that are developed in the course of this, and then it really gets edited down to the bare essentials. And over the course of the next few months, there may be things that didn't make that final cut that end up taking on a life of their own, and we certainly see that happening with each of the projects, and that would be the continuance of this as well. And so for this year and then the following year, if we stay at the same sort of 6 or 7 projects, then we're going to end up with 18 to 22, 23 projects that as a whole will represent a very diverse way of a range of interventions in this problematic of the new normal, but I think we'll also see a lot of patterns and relationships with each other. So within that group of 20 or so, I anticipate that there'll be, the ratios are always a little bit are pretty regular. We'll see 3 or 4 or 5, I'm sure, that are become quite renowned. That's certainly our hope. Okay, so let me shift then to some of the questions that we have on the live chat. Again, if you want anything else I'm not speaking to that you want your comments spoken to, please let me know. So what is the scope? Hi, everyone. What is the scope to engage further after 5 months are done? And is there any investigative research which students can continue to do? Yes. So a couple of things, just to engage this topic a bit more. To date, one of the things we're adding to the program this year that we know was that in July, after this huge public showcase with, I don't know, however many thousands of people came in July to see the work over 2 days on July 3rd and 4th. The students, everyone stuck around for at least a week after the whole thing was done, strategizing what's next for each of these projects. Where are we going to move to and work together? How are we going to develop this as well? And so it became clear that we really want to build up, not as a supplement and sort of the post program, alumni support of a given project or something like that, but actually build the launch and development and further construction of each of the projects into the form of the program as well. And so once the public demonstration of these projects is complete in June, we'll have an additional week or so in which we'll be bringing in various topical experts and consultants who can talk through the projects and work with the groups to understand what the next paths for them may be. And then we'll know exactly who that needs to be once we have an understanding of how each of the projects really shape out. That may range everything from look, here's how you need to position the business model here in order to attract this kind of venture capital for your initiative. Or here's how you need to spin what you to transform that business model to something that was going to be able to support art grants, because we have projects that in fact have done both. Or here's the film festival track, or here's how you could develop this into a consultancy, or this or that, or here's how this can plug into another kind of larger scale research something else that's already going on at a much larger scale. And so we want to build that support into the program more directly this as well. I guess one of the things that, just to be very plain about it, I think one of the things that we're looking at is the economics of urban design and the different scales by which urban design works. That it's not only it is not only moving the buildings around or saying where the roads go and this sort of high level massing urban scale massing exercises. Though this is extraordinarily important. I'm not sidelining this or making it somehow less central at all. But rather that there's economics of this in which states are clients, developers are clients, and designers are subcontractors to an initiative and a design project that they may have various degrees of the ability to compose or control. Software works in some different economics. In some cases, it's similar, where the developers are working for large initiatives. Does contract with large initiatives, sometimes quite successfully. In other cases, that's a bit more of a, not necessarily the traditional startup sort of model, but something in which that there is, that the platform tools make it possible for much smaller players to develop initiatives that can have a broader impact considerably quicker than designers who are waiting for state clients to decide to engage them in one way or another. And so while we have our suspicions of about just as we have suspicions about state client models versus suspicions for startup models, we want to try to find all the paths by which the best design can actually see the light of day. And so if there's ways in which urban design can borrow tips and tricks from software design in order to get things off the ground and engage and develop, that's something we want to support. And it dovetails quite nicely, I think, with the logic of interdisciplinary urban design groups as we see it. Okay. Greetings to Geneva. What will be the role of Metahaven during the 5 months of the program? So Daniel and Vinka will be coming at least a couple times throughout the program. Sometimes together, sometimes just one or the other. Last time they were around 3 times and did for 2 extended periods of life, which was and I think we'll do it basically for the most part relatively similar this time, where they did a seminar, a week-long seminar to start with. I should just say about the modules, just makes his faces. You haven't seen it. Many of the modules are intense and quite short. They're 2 days a week or so. Other ones are a bit longer, 2 weeks. But every student will be working with each of all the faculty going on, and so we keep them short, intense workshops. Boom, 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 boom. Going along. And so Metahaven will be doing a seminar. They're publishing a book with us based on some of the work they've done called Digital Tarkovsky, which is looking at, if you know their work and their rotation towards more cinematic forms of design, speaks to this pretty directly. And so they'll be working the seminar, but then they'll also be working with the groups a bit later on after the basic idea of the project has already been developed. If you're familiar with their work, you know that they are really masters of building a maximum amount of poetic and ironic tension into the visual unfolding of a design idea that is itself based as much on geopolitics as it is on an interpersonal experience, and vice versa. And it's the confluence of the two that is their real forte. And this is the thought, this is the thinking and the expertise that we brought in with them. As you probably know, I've worked with them for many years, collaborated with them, and my work is influenced strongly by theirs and vice versa. And so their thinking is and their way of working is infused throughout the program, really top to bottom. And you'll have an opportunity to work with them very closely, very hands-on, to develop your own work and your own voice for the project as well, for sure. They'll be coming a little bit later in the program as things a little bit develop. Okay, if we're interested in new modes of urban governance, how would the program in general contribute to our research, and in particular AI? Interesting question. Yes, we're obviously very interested in issues of urban governance as well, and looking at the scales by which that governance may take place. We understand that governance is not only referring to policies that governments follow or guidelines and policies that corporations follow, but we take governance in the more expanded sense of the way in which complex systems have formed norms that are explicit norms or implicit norms, and that how those norms enforce themselves and replicate themselves at urban scale. And so we are looking as much at we'd be looking as much at issues of citizenship versus para-citizenship or non-citizenship in terms of who moves through cities and has access to what part of cities. But we're also looking at the ways in which interface systems may do very much the same, screen-based systems of this as well. And again, it's not just citizenship as a topic, but just this is a kind of example within this as well. So the real dynamic we're looking through, I think, is how it is that governance as a form finding and form enforcing phenomenon. That it coheres populations of people, goods, or ideas or services into particular geographies within borders, that it coheres them into particular swarms and polities through building envelopes or software envelopes. And so to the extent, and does through the production, exercise, and inscription of power. And so the extent to which governance is taken as a phenomenon that finds form and enforces form through this mediation of power, it's already a design, it's already a medium of design. Our interest in governance is not because we want to evade or necessarily undermine power as a first principle, but rather that we're interested in reformulating what those norms may be. And so this connotation of the new normal that we're working with, it has this both the descriptive and projective connotation, that it's both, we're looking at what the new normal is, what this conundrum we found ourselves in may in fact be, how can we map it, how can we understand it on its own terms, and second, how can design contribute to the specifications and enforcement of new norms, the new normative at the time of this as well. And so AI, the role that AI plays in this is extremely interesting and complex, that the way in which we think of AI both as something that absorbs and mirrors and replicates the data that it's fed, the programming that it's allowed to operate upon at the same time, and yet also in ways in which it may come to constitute not just a amplification of precedent systems, reinforcing bias, for example, but may also introduce patterns of transformation within those systems that are quite unexpected, quite alien, quite difficult for us to attempt to sort of recognize, even because we're looking for something else. And those are equally part of the question of what is a new normal and what those norms may be. And I think we want to we want to sort of move away from a notion that that AI is always in the service of a form of power that we think we understand. We want to assume that it may, in fact, be evasive of that in ways in which they're quite novel. I hope that's helpful. Could you discuss how you map the issues of present political powers and the strategic design puzzles New Normal deals with? For example, approaching the political exception economic zones. Sure. I mean, I can give both a very specific answer to this, and then a more general answer to it. The specific one is that we're working in Russia, and the Russian context is extremely is really is the framework by which we're working here. We're taking the Russian context both as a particular case of within a larger universal condition, and also one in which we may find a different kind of global condition. Again, that the tension between a neo-traditionalism and a tradition of sort of secular universalism, both at the same time on top of each other. These are some of the issues that we find here in Russia that are extraordinarily interesting and fascinating, and ones that are pretty relevant more broadly, for sure. And so, as you may be aware, the political situation in Russia is a bit peculiar at this time. Always has been, Russia has always had a lot of, the drama of the politics of Russia is part of the poetry of the culture, for sure. In both its, both its most aspirational utopian sense, and also its whatever you imagine the opposite of that to be. And so this is the water in which this program swims. We're literally right across the river from the Kremlin. There's nothing, all of that being said, there hasn't, the research space that we have within Strelka is extraordinarily open and free for, given this context. The target, what we're looking at really is the development of forms of urban settlement and platformization and engagement that are probably kind of outside of what the government is even looking for, and so there haven't really been any issues. There's not been any issues with working with the government in this proximity in this kind of space as well. That said, I think one of the things we're looking at with this issue of the political and economic exceptional zone in this as well is how it is that things, that these sites, whether they're a contiguous zone like Hong Kong or Shenzhen, or a discontiguous zone like the sort of like the quasi-autonomous space of the cloud, which has its own kind of provisional forms of political sovereignty, as I discuss in my work, that these may represent sort of provisional moments by which other kinds of systems may emerge, not in direct opposition, in binary opposition to precedent systems, but even within them in ways that can be transformative and eruptive. They're not necessarily positive, that eruption and transformation is not necessarily always positive, but it's there, and it's something that we can leverage. As Keller Easterling, who writes about this quite eloquently featured in our program that two can play at this game, and we're interested in the counter leveraging of those conditions of exception. One of the things that we're looking at then in this regard is how it is that these patterns and zones and territories of exception become increasingly less exceptional. That they, in a way, are becoming increasingly normative. That the part of the normative is that these territories, that the norm versus exception dynamic in a certain ways can oscillate and flip. That which is inside of which is the exception to which, is always a matter of decision. And so that in the Schmittian sense of the decision of the exception, it's not only that there is an exception is decided, but in fact, which site of this demarcation is exceptional to which. And so, to be clear, within the Russian context, we're looking at the ways in which these zones of exception may in fact allow for forms of urban and social experimentation, aggregation, agglomeration, that wouldn't be possible otherwise. And it's a way in which the question of urban design can provide for and model alternatives that would be difficult to articulate in a more traditional way in which political science, for example, may try to articulate that. So I hope that's helpful. So Nikolai's message about the OBOR, the One Belt, One Road initiative. So we're looking at this in a few different ways. I think that again, one of the themes that we're doubling down on is this large-scale discontiguous infrastructural systems. I mean, one of the other things I think part of the research shift to East is also just as a point of research engagement for us is to understand and to bring the understanding really central to what the program is working on, to the relationship between Russia and China, as both in terms of the economic relationships, political relationships, ecological relationships between these two powers, and the way in which that the conditions for Russian urbanism more broadly will be ones that is inextricable from those relations. And so this sort of Eurasian turn toward East, we're sort of using the One Belt, One Road initiative as a device, if you like, in order as a big, not such a thread to pull on to see what it moves and what we can pull out of it to where it goes, but since it's so huge, we're more of a cable that we can pull on to find out where this would sort of go. And so the fact that there is that, even though from a design standpoint, much of what the One Belt, One Road initiative will amount to are railroads and roads and ports and things that look that may not be so glamorous. It is necessarily a way in which these two powers have developed a kind of an official future in which the integration of both of these polities, economies, and cultures is presumed as the basis of this as well. And so we're interested to a certain extent in unpacking, rereading forensically the aspirations and pathologies of those official futures to a certain extent, but also once again to look at how political and economic zones of exception oftentimes tend to be clustered around sites of certain kinds of logistical of circuits. So whether that's a port or a production zone or something, or trading site, for example. That networks that these nodes within these networks can sometimes have this capacity. So that's something we're going to be using and sort of leveraging this as well. And so again, we're looking at One Belt, One Road, both in terms of its tangible profile, but also as a kind of to the extent to which it doesn't really exist yet, other than in the planners' minds, as an official future that we will be accounting for all its intangibility. How rigorous will the discussions be? Would students who previously briefly studied speculative working theory done in a Raver kitchen would sort of thrive under the program? Quite rigorous, I should say. I think that the level of discussion that we had in the first year was as intense as any program that I've been in. I've taught at UCSD for some time, European Graduate School, SCIARC. I think that the level of the discussion and of the discourse was extremely high, extremely productive, but also extremely open and generous. It wasn't that we had that, considering how broad the background of everyone was, the openness and ability for everyone to contribute their particular expertise to this discussion based on their background was exactly what we hoped for and exactly what we wanted. And so each of the people that we select for the program, everyone will know something and know how to do something that no one else does, and this is what we are really interested in. So the reason I say this is that the bar is set quite high, but there isn't some kind of very specific secret catechism or language that participants must know before they're allowed to speak or to participate in this conversation. The reason that the level was so high was because quite the opposite of that. Now, if you've worked with Tony and Fiona in the past, or with Kitchi within the past, I think that that's a great prep for this. I've known them for Fiona in particular for a really long time. Big fan of their work. I would say that part of the thing is that we're probably, they come from a more industrial design, interaction design background. And so some of the conversations that they're drawing on are ones that are specific to the research agenda, where we're really coming from a background that is more focused on architectural thought, urban thought, political philosophical thought, and probably, I think, more generally. And so I think there's a significant sort of, the shift of this as well. On this as well. I mean, there's another discussion, maybe some of the questions, the different ways in which Tony and Fiona would define speculative design or define its purpose that would be different than I have. And we've had lots of discussions on this topic as well. But the simple answer to your question is yes, absolutely. That we've had students from the DI program last year and hope to have some more alumni from the program this year who are interested in developing that direction this as well. What is the intent? I'm sorry. What is the intent for the question regarding the 2-day workshop in the application? So I'm not sure exactly which question you're referring to. The interest, what we're looking at during the 2-day work, if you're talking about the, I'm not sure exactly, I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly which workshop you're specifically referring to in the application. Whether it's we do a workshop when the students who have been admitted have arrived. We also will do students who are based in Moscow. We invite them to Strelka in person. Oh, given a chance to do a 2-day workshop for your peers, Strelka, what would you teach? Great. So this is not a, I see, thank you. So just to repeat the question, if you were asked to do a 2-day workshop for your peers at Strelka, what would you teach? The reason we ask you this is because if you're admitted, you'll maybe be asked to do this. We'd like to, one of the, again, the balance between the program as a kind of postgraduate education program and as a design research think tank is one in which all of the participants are active, and all the participants are part of the development of the research that we're collaborating on and constructing together. And so even though we have assembled this incredible faculty as part of the program, many of the most really important pedagogical experiences that some of our participants had were in relationship to one another. There's things that each of you will know and will have the ability to do that none of us do, and we want to bring all of those things and bring them to the table this as well. And so whether or not it's a formal, okay, we're blocking off these 2 days and so person is going to be teaching us how to do whatever, or has been leading us on an exercise around this, or taking us on a field trip to a site that they're familiar with, or something like this as well. It's extremely packed calendar, so times 30 people, it's not going to work out to where we have, that would be 2 days times 30 people is 60 days. We're not breaking up 2 months in order to do this. However, more informally, we absolutely, I think everyone did something last year, and we will amplify that again this year. The reason we asked the question is to really get a sense of, in a very direct way, what would you like to bring? What would you like to bring to the table for the program, or what would you like to share, and what it is that you think what is that you feel is something that you know or know how, something you know that or know how, as Keller says, that you would like to make part of this conversation. And so it's a way of also for us to understand a little bit more about how you see yourself, which is important because we're admitting humans, not just applicants. Will the program focus only on large urban exteriors and infrastructures, or also urban interiors, public, semi-private, private factories, airports? Yes, absolutely. The scale, I'm sorry if this point wasn't clear enough. The scale by which we're really looking at the question of the urban is really quite, is much more diverse than a traditional urban design program. Again, some of the projects that we developed last year were software-based projects that were meant to be used one user at a time. And so the intimacy of that point of view, pedestrian view of the city, was built into the project as well. In terms of interiors, we have, in terms of interiors, we are also going to be working with Petra Blaise, Inside Out. I'm sorry, I didn't mention her because we haven't confirmed the dates exactly, but I wanted to be careful. But I think it's safe to say that we're working with Petra Blaise, Inside Out. And now you may know Petra's work. She does a lot of the interiors and landscape for OMA. I'll just say for myself, many of the OMA projects that I admire the most, a lot of her work is really the major contributor to this. This as well. And so if the interest on interiors itself is something that would work. So that's an important part of this. And so, a lot of airports are hugely interesting to us as part of this, as well as these sort of nodal points in which a lot of the contradictions of those various mobile or immobile global cultures become concentrated into these these zones of overlapping securitization and leisure, interlaced with one another in various weird patterns, and seeing these as something that is in fact not sort of a supplementary or auxiliary form to the normal, to the way in which the normal structure of the city, but in fact maybe it's increasingly essential. It's core ingredients at this point going forward. And so there's questions of publicity and privacy in the first place, and the ways in which those are being perhaps reconstructed and redefined in relationship to emerging technologies is a really important issue. Automation, last year, automation was a big topic for us, and I think it'll be continued going forward. And particularly one of the things we're interested in around automation is around these issues of publicity and privacy. In that we see the layout of the modern city, residents here, working here, transportation here, leisure zones there. That canon of massing is the result of a particular era in industrial and post-industrial economic mode of production, if you like, that may be transformed rather fundamentally by automation. The profile and relationship of what counts as a factory, what's a residence, exactly, as things move towards more platform-based economics. These are not hypothetical questions. These are ones that are quite central to even really normative urban discussions. I'm just not sure that the answers that we're getting from those discussions are ones that are quite helpful for us. And so the types of questions that you're asking here about starting with these questions of publicity and privacy as a key by which to understand these infrastructural transformations, that's exactly where we're kind of looking for this. Okay, so I hope that's helpful. I think I've gotten to each of the questions that was posted here. I'd like to, so let me just take a pause here and see if there are anything else people would like to pose here, and then I'll go ahead and continue. If we've reached the end of it and I've answered everything, that's fine too. Let us know. Thanks for making this fun. Yeah, my pleasure. My pleasure. I look forward to working with you. So over the next month or so, as everyone's putting their sort of applications together, we'll be posting quite a lot to the newnormal.strelka.com website. And so that's an important place to sort of keep track of learning more about the previous work, of last year's work, and the rest of this itself, and the stuff that we've been working on, and developing news about this, the announcements of as new faculty are confirmed for the program, that we'll be announcing those names there as well. I would also ask you that if you're, if you're interested in the program, as you learn more about it, if there's other people that you think would be useful candidates for the program, this as well, by all means, help get the word out if you like. I'll say that the admissions to the program is quite competitive. The percentage of students of the applicants we take is relatively low, but I'll say that we do not have a set profile for the ideal new normal student that we're looking for. It's not like we have someone in mind that we're looking for, and we're going to take the 30 people who most resemble that person. We want a diverse group of people. We want people who, frankly, may have felt a bit frustrated in the ability to make good on the ideas that they have developed, and are looking to helping carve out an alternate path for themselves and for those ideas. And so the last year of the 30 that we took, and this year for the 30 that we took, again, the disciplinary backgrounds will be quite diverse, the geographic backgrounds will be quite diverse, the educational background will be quite diverse. And so for your application, my strong recommendation is to really show us your best work, regardless of the form that takes. If you're an economist, don't try to all of a sudden become an urbanist and become an architect in 4 weeks and draw buildings, for example. We can read your economics papers, and we're interested in why you as an economist are interested in these issues, because we are interested in the role that economics plays within the speculative urbanism. And so we want to know the real deal. If you're a filmmaker, show us this. If you're an architect, show us the work that you've done. We want to really see your best work as you've seen it, not and so I'm just trying to say that right up front, because I think that's an important aspect of this as well. So it doesn't look like there's any more questions. So hopefully we've covered quite a bit. I look forward to looking at your applications for the program. Again, it'll be due November 1st. The newnormal.strelka.com. I assume you all have it, but if for some reason you don't, if I don't spell it wrong, that would definitely not make for a good outcome. That's where you'll find everything that you need to do. And so, anyway, it's my pleasure to meet all of you virtually, and hope to see you in Moscow in next year. All right, I'll speak to you soon. Thank you very much.